All right, welcome back to another week of interviewing cybersecurity professionals for our security awareness manager community. It's like there's a fly. Perfect timing. I'm really excited this week to have Alethe Denis and senior security consultant at Bishop Fox. And I'm really excited to get your insights. And we're going to be talking about why training is not enough and what we can do about that. Alethe, if you will just introduce yourself a little bit more and tell us a little more about yourself, and then we'll just get into it from there.
Absolutely. So my name is Alethe Denis, and I'm on the red team at Bishop Fox, which is an offensive security company. I
Awesome.
am probably most well known for winning the social engineering capture the flag at DEF CON in 2019. And earlier this year, I presented a training to the United States Army Special Operations Command on social
Oh,
engineering.
wow.
So that's probably one
Wow.
of my favorite experiences of the recent couple years.
Very cool. No, I actually got to hear your podcast talking about your DEF CON experience, and just even as a working mom, it was very inspirational to hear just the whole process and how you transitioned into that and was successful. It's really really interesting. So I encourage people to check that out, and we'll include that in the recap also when we write it in any other links that you want to share, direct people to. So we'll also have that in the recap as well. And the army thing will definitely might need to have you back and hear some more on that at some point. Is it right that you have kind of a focus in I just went completely blank. In critical infrastructure? Is that kind of your main focus or expertise?
That is where I've been working most recently. Prior to joining Bishop Fox, I was working with a company that did focus predominantly on critical infrastructure,
Okay.
things like city and government, DoD contractors. And I think a lot of that was covered also by Jack in the Darknet Diaries, which I think is the podcast you're referring to.
Right,
Um,
right.
Jack did a tremendous job of telling my story, and he is an absolutely expert and inspirational storyteller. He made me sound way cooler than I actually am. But yeah, uh, the critical infrastructure and that experience working with companies and organizations that don't typically have a lot of budget for security
Mhm.
programs, let alone, expensive trainings and testing and all those things. It gave me a really unique perspective on security awareness training and our community of security awareness training folks. I think could
Right.
benefit from understanding that there are tons of organizations out there that are struggling with the same types of budgetary and resourcing constraints that a lot of us are feel like we have our hands tied behind our back.
Hmm. Okay. Well, so we'll definitely try to get, some of those insights as we go into it. So talking about like, training in general, you've had experience presenting to companies and then turning around and fishing those companies, and testing out their listening skills and how well they understood. Um, but when we were talking about the topic for the conversation today, you said kind of one of your main um I don't want to say not pet peeves, kind of like your soapbox is, people why people have to understand that security awareness training is not enough. So kind of can we go in a little bit about what your thoughts are there and just kind of start us off.
Yeah, I think it is a giant leap that we've made within the last decade or so that companies are embracing the need for security awareness
Right.
training and more specifically social engineering awareness training. And that's
Yeah.
fantastic. But I believe wholeheartedly that we can't become complacent and just assign computer-based learning and videos to folks and set them down with a PowerPoint presentation and expect humans to engage with that content and then retain that content and put it into practice.
Right.
That is something I think is a gap in our understanding of how to properly implement security awareness training.
Right. It goes beyond just being a tool, right? It's not just something you switch on and then sit back and let it do its thing.
Right.
there's there's a lot more that has to go into it, and us humans, we like to be complex. Uh, don't make things easy for sure. Um, so where are some of the things, as someone who's gone in and trained companies, where are some of the things that you see that kind of fall short in kind of your traditional awareness training programs? Um, even if they're trying to not just do a set and forget, they're trying to engage. But where do you see the people kind of typically trip up over and over?
Well, I've had companies where I've trained live, both virtually or in person, and then I've come back to do phishing assessments within a month or two, and we've
Hmm.
still had, 15 to 30% click rate. And
Oh,
that
wow.
is something that I think is wildly unexpected from the companies themselves. They're like, well, we did security awareness training. Why didn't this work? Either you're a bad trainer or our folks didn't retain this stuff, and in any case you're a bad trainer. And so that's something I've had
Yeah.
to kind of get around, and I think that it's tough, especially if you're managing a security awareness training program where the content is pre-developed and on demand.
Hmm.
You can lead a horse to water, right? But you can't make it
Right.
drink. And
Right.
so we have kind of relied upon this idea that we can assign training, but we aren't going the step further to analyze whether or not that training is effective. And I
Hmm.
believe that this is different for every company. There may be companies
Okay.
where, a 1 hour, once a year, um, pre on demand, pre recorded content delivery method is effective. There may be companies where
Okay.
that is effective. However, in my experience, for the majority of organizations, the majority of people, that is not an effective means of training. And for each
Right.
organization, it really comes down to the culture of that organization, which will be dependent on, geographical location, the types of things that are prioritized by the organization, whether or not it's a, top-down investment by the company in the
Hmm.
idea even of security awareness training.
Right.
What I mean
Right.
by that is if the leaders at the top are not invested and engaged with the training, then that that feeling will then trickle down to the
It
remaining
does.
employees. And so, what I believe is critical is that if you are responsible for running a security awareness training program, that you are deploying different types of content out to
Hmm.
your population, your community of employees, and that you are measuring how effective those training campaigns are using testing.
Right.
And so if you do like an A/B, think like marketing and advertising type testing of your security awareness training content, and then test the individuals that took that training within a few weeks or months to determine if it was effective, then you can start to figure out what types of content, what types of trainings are
Hmm.
engaging your staff, and then use those going forward. So whether it's an
Yeah.
in-person training that's, got a bunch of games or things that people can do. Some people find that obnoxious. Some teams love it.
Right.
Those types of things can all get tested. If it's, short and sweet videos that are delivered via email or a,
Hmm.
computer-based learning system that are, only a couple of minutes, something similar to what Wizer offers, then you can test to see if those were effective. And if they are, great, you can continue to deploy those out and drip them out over a more extended period of time rather than hitting folks
Right.
with a whole 60 minutes worth of stuff that they need to learn in one foul
Yeah.
swoop every year.
Yeah.
So, I mean, to boil it down, I think it's important to use a variety of different types of training, measure how
Hmm.
effective those are using testing, phishing testing, phishing or phone phishing testing,
Hmm.
and then finding the way to make it resonate with your audience. Because ultimately, we are protecting people here, not just
Right.
company data. And I believe that
Right.
if you can find a way to make it relevant to the human as an individual, um,
Hmm.
speak to how they can protect their own families, their own money, their own
Absolutely.
devices, then if they understand what's what's to lose here, what's in it for them.
Yeah.
And they're more aware of the psychological manipulation rather than just being
Hmm.
shown 25 different phishing emails and saying, this is what a phishing email looks like. But if they actually
Right. Right.
understand what that manipulation feels like, so that if they're emotionally triggered by an email, they go, oh wait, I know that this might
Right.
be
Need to step
something
back.
that's fishy and not legitimate. I should take a step back and analyze this with my logical
Right.
brain first. Teaching those defensive mechanisms to
Hmm.
people to protect themselves from scams can oftentimes lead them to take those practices into work automatically without even thinking about it.
Right. Right, absolutely. I mean, that's kind of one of the main themes I've heard over and over with these conversations, cyber professionals is really making it personal is when you have the biggest success, of people then carrying it into that work life. Because then it makes sense. They have that connection, right? It's no longer this, thing over here that's
Right.
just kind of this ethereal, like, oh yeah, cyber. Uh,
Right.
so to
Well,
bring it home.
and there's investment. If you tell me it's my job to guard something and I don't have anything to lose if it goes missing, then I probably won't care as much.
Right,
And that's
right.
just humans. We prioritize where we spend our time and energy based on what's going to benefit us or
Yeah,
impact us in a negative way the most severely.
right.
So I think it's really important to remember that we are dealing with people, and that people need to be properly motivated in order to take
Yeah.
action. And that kind of leads me into my next point, which is this idea of fostering the culture of reporting within your organization. It's something that
Okay.
some companies get right, but it is also something that some companies just miss the mark on. And
Okay.
it's wonderful if you have people to the point where they are skeptical and they qualify everything that they read in their email and they don't just take it at face value. That's the first step.
Mhm.
If we can get there, that's great. But then
Right.
empowering those same people to take action if they see something like that and not just delete it and move on with their day is the next
Right.
step. And
Right.
so we've kind of gone through these like three phases of security awareness. We're aware. Now we know how to identify what looks suspicious. And now we
Mhm.
need to move from that phase into this empowerment of our teams to report anything suspicious and take action, that's
Right.
outside of their normal job responsibilities to help protect the rest of the organization. Because ultimately, there's always going to be one. Um, it is extremely rare for there to be a phishing test where not at least one person makes a mistake and clicks a link, let alone
Um,
downloads something or puts their credentials in. So there has to be this culture of reporting. We are a team. We play together,
mhm.
we lose together, we win together. And if we don't take care of each other, you have those first few people that get the email, they recognize it as a phishing attack, and then they start to tell everyone. Those are the
Mhm.
people that are going to protect the organization from those, 1% or less who
Right.
unfortunately either because they are not invested in the company culture or they didn't retain what they learned from security
Right.
awareness training or they're just having a bad day.
Exactly.
you
You're
know
very stressed
I
and just
mean,
not paying attention.
right, you can know all the things and just be caught off guard, be distracted, be just having an emotional day and
Right.
fail a phishing test. And so having that extra layer of
Mhm.
prevention in that culture of reporting, people that can drop something into the group chat or the team chat and say, hey, everybody, I just saw this email. You might get it too. It looks like this. Here's a screenshot. Don't engage with it.
Right. Exactly.
That
We
is
just
going
had
to
that
be
this week.
right. That's going to be
You
the
know?
difference. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the difference
Yeah.
because I mean, there's new research that's happening. I've always believed that it's a culture. issue if you have an organization that just continues to fail phishing tests. But there's new
Hmm.
research that's being done that may indicate that it's actually cognitive in nature. And so I'm excited to see where
Okay.
that goes, that there are
That's
simply
interesting.
humans that will not be able to retain and take action based on what they are learning in security awareness training is something that I think will
Mm.
be interesting to see how that develops
Yeah,
over time. But
that'd
again,
be fascinating.
it's going to come down to that reporting and that ability to share and then support our teams in knowing if something looks suspicious and alerting folks before someone else makes a mistake.
Right. I think one thing you were talking about, kind of the three levels of, awareness, first just becoming aware and then, identifying and then that third step of taking action. I think there's kind of a psychological aspect to that as well that turns it to empowering the person that they can actually do something about it, you know, um, and kind of teaching them that, it's not just like you said, deleting it. I think and that too has kind of a shift in how people view online safety. You don't it's
Mm-hmm.
not something just passive that you have to be afraid of or just kind of go and duck and hope nothing happens, which is how I used to behave, before I got into cyber and understanding it. I was like, well, I know there's something hackers out there and they probably have my information and I hope I didn't do anything wrong. You know, and then slowly, I'm like, wait, no, I can be proactive in this and I can even help to deter,
Mm-hmm.
by taking certain actions and I think, helping employees understand, no, you're not powerless, even if you're not tech savvy. There are things you can do. And I think that really kind of changes the conversation also for employees as well. That it doesn't have to be this, very vague, uh, you know,
Idea. Yeah, that's so
idea. Yeah.
true. One of the things that kind of pushed me into this as a profession was I used to work for a giant telecommunications company. I
Hmm.
quit working for this organization and been a couple years, and I was working remotely from home. This was before it was cool, and I got a phone call on my cell phone, and the caller ID said it was the customer service 800 number of this telecommunications company. And I thought, well, that's
Okay.
weird. Wonder why they're calling me. So I answered the phone, and it was a woman who sounded like she was located in the same geographical area as the call centers I know this company employs.
Uh-huh.
So her accent matched a person who would work in a call center doing this customer support job for this telecommunications company. And she said, you've been such a valuable customer of ours. We want to show you our appreciation. I was sitting there like with my coffee in my hand at like, not even 8 o'clock in the morning. And she says, we want to put a credit of $100 on your bill, but I just wanted you to, confirm your PIN number on your account. And I thought, that's weird. Yeah, sure. It's 1, 2, 3, 4. And she's like, okay, thank you so much. We're going to go ahead and get that credit added to your bill. And, you'll
Wow.
see it on your next invoice and have a great day. And I got off the phone and I just sat there going, that was super weird. And I turned around to my husband. I'm like, that was really weird. Like, she said that we were getting a credit on our bill. And then she asked me for the 4-digit PIN code. I'm like, this doesn't sound right. So I called within a couple minutes. I called the telecommunications company on their short code from my cell phone.
Mhm.
And I reached their authentic customer support people and I explained the situation. And of course, the woman kind of laughed at me and she said, we'll never call you to add a credit to your bill. And I'm like, I know it. I thought it sounded really strange. I said, well, can we just go ahead and change my PIN code? So we changed the PIN code on the account. And luckily, there was nothing negative, no negative
Oh,
repercussions.
wow.
What it turned out being is that they would order phones and have them shipped somewhere else on your account.
Oh, okay.
And then you get stuck
Okay.
with paying for the devices. And so
Wow.
I guess the original scammer called me back because the PIN code I gave them didn't work. And because I changed it and tried to get the PIN number from me again. And so I kind of called them out
Uh-huh.
and said, you're a scam artist. And they were like, well, no, I mean, and it just, it was one of those moments where I was like, I am never, ever going to be had like that again.
Wow.
ever,
Wow.
because I felt like I just completely got bamboozled, had
Yeah.
been taken
Yeah, I've
advantage
had
of, and
that
I was
feeling.
angry.
Yes.
And I mean, the
Yes.
most embarrassing part is that I worked for the company that they were pretending to be. Like, how embarrassing is that? And it was just that right combination of distraction, time of the day, not really paying
Right.
attention. And humans just have this desire to be helpful, but they were also
Right.
incentivizing me with this credit on my bill. So it was like, well, of course I'll
Right.
help you.
Sure.
So yeah, I think we're all very much susceptible to social engineering, and it really just comes down to those three things that we've discussed, that figuring out what type of security
Mhm.
awareness training and what type of content resonates with your team, fostering that uh, idea and culture of reporting to protect our teams, but
Right.
really digging down into how do I make this resonate with the individual and
Mhm.
demonstrate and get their buy-in to protect their own assets, and then have them bring those skills into work with them.
Right. Right. No, I think that's, it's so it's such it's not an easy task, because like you said, it's like each business is its own living organism,
Yes.
right? Its own universe that has its own rules and ways of operation and personality, you know, um, and trying to hack that, within
Right.
the
Yes,
company to be
absolutely.
able to address it, like it's such a challenge. And then you're constantly losing people and hiring new people,
Mhm.
and it's going to shift and change. And I'm really like in awe and appreciation of the security awareness managers. And no, they don't get near enough recognition
No,
for
and
the roles
what's
that they have.
shocking is many of them are the entire security program. And a lot of organizations that I've worked with, their IT person is their security person, is all
Right.
things technical for the entire organization. And that's a tremendous burden.
Yeah.
So I feel that having regular assessments and
Mhm.
using that reporting, leveraging those vendors to translate your resourcing constraints, your time, your inability to be everywhere all at once in less
Right.
than 10 hours a day of work time. Um, Use your vendors who are writing the reporting that your C-suite, C-level employees will see,
Mhm.
those decision makers who decide what your budget is, who decide if you can hire some junior folks to take on the daily tasks so you can focus on the big picture.
Right.
Leverage those assessments to your benefit,
Mm.
because essentially what I've done mostly over the last few years is translate the woes of security teams into language that demonstrates the value of giving additional resources to
Yeah.
those security functions within organizations. Because without compromise, it's highly unlikely that those who have the ability to add budget will see the value in giving that
Right.
budget to these teams.
Right. No, that's really great tips because the vendors do, or they should like understand, how to connect those dots and how to bridge, this risk is this much, business
Hmm.
risk, and be able to provide some of that. So I think that's a really great tip is, to turn to your vendors and getting um that translation from them. I think that's a really great point. Um
Well, and I think
so when
vendor
you
risk management programs are starting to force that conversation,
more.
because we have vendors that go, well, I don't really want to connect to your network if you're not properly guarding your information. How do I know you're going to take care of mine? Um,
Right.
so, yeah, I think it does add additional validity to the argument that we need more robust security teams within our organization that have the
Mhm.
resources that they need to properly and adequately protect,
Right.
as well as security awareness training programs that do have the time to test to see what content is the most engaging, how
Right.
effective that content is at preventing phishing and things like that.
Yeah. Is there kind of do you have any stories or any like particular instances that stand out to you that is just kind of illustrative of, just kind of the whole thing that we've been talking about? I like stories.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of an organization that's the best uh, for me to talk about. I had one organization that was um, in logistics, and
Mhm.
they were struggling to demonstrate the value of their security team of
Uh-huh.
one to the higher up folks. Trying to redact things in my language here as I go.
Sure.
But there was a CFO that was our primary point of contact. They were the individual that signed the check to pay for the
Right.
assessment, essentially. And when we had our initial kickoff call, this person, we asked them if we could speak to other functions within the organization. We'd like to speak to IT, of course, but we'd also like to speak to accounting and accounts payable and HR and folks that were responsible for other areas of their business. And
Mhm.
they just thought, why would you need to speak to those people to do a security assessment? This is a security assessment. Just talk to the IT people.
Right. You
And
just say the
we tried to
technical stuff.
explain, right? We tried to explain that, of course, we want to get, an idea of your network, your, technology footprint, your information systems. But we also want to evaluate any potential risk or vulnerabilities within your, finance, legal, governance, operations, accounting, all these other areas of your business, because that's where the social engineering attacks are likely to go, not to your IT team of one.
Right.
And so it was rough because I know that the individual that was responsible for IT and security was desperate for resources to protect
Right.
the organization as a whole. But the leaders of the organization had this idea that all that the security team were protecting were these endpoints, these devices on the network.
Hmm.
And I think
Right.
that us changing that conversation with companies and being able to adequately and properly convey the importance of protecting not just a network with software and tools and systems, but of
Right.
protecting people and processes and data and how those transactions are being handled by all of those various departments within an
Mhm.
organization is something that's going to be critical for us over the next few years, especially now that we're coming out of the pandemic with so many workforces being distributed.
Right.
So many of us are working in fully distributed companies that don't even have a headquarters really anymore. um,
Mhm.
and so it's something that I think is even more important now because you've got all these remote employees. And I mean, to be frank,
Mhm.
when I did the social engineering capture the flag, I specifically targeted remote employees. And this was prior to the pandemic because I
Right.
knew that they were isolated from the herd, if that makes
Right.
sense.
I
It's a
mean,
lot
that's
more
exactly
difficult for it's a lot more difficult for a remote employee to get a confirmation of, hey, is this phone call okay for me to talk to this person, and just like stand up, from their cubicle and go, are
Mm.
we getting new laptops?
Right.
So
Right.
yeah, I
100%.
I kind of used what I learned from getting scammed myself in my pretext for that competition, and it was spoof the number of the headquarters on the
Mhm.
caller ID calling out. Um, Pick somebody who is remote because they can't easily confirm whether you are who you say you are or not, and
Right.
then incentivize them with the idea that their work laptop is being replaced with a new one.
Yeah.
So, these things will work so frequently. And unless we are inspiring people to um, really invest in identifying when they are being worked or taken advantage of or
Right.
triggered or coerced
Right.
or played, depending on how you want to term it. But that's really what it comes down to, is that we're taking advantage of basic human behaviors and psychology
Mhm.
and leveraging that against people. And that's where the differentiator is with training. A lot of our, first iterations of security awareness training were, look for the S on your browser to make sure it's a secure website. And
Right,
this is what a phishing email looks like with all these grammatical errors and spelling mistakes and
right.
weird language that we don't recognize or use in our common terms and casual conversations. But I think we've gone beyond that now because, I mean, not only are there vendors who offer English grammar and punctuation services to scammers who are creating phishing emails now,
Oh, yeah.
but there's just this constant one-upsmanship
Mhm.
between the scammers and we as humans trying to educate and protect our teams.
Right, and we have to have that constant awareness and education, and then, like you said, having in the, community, right?
Hmm.
A culture of we're in this together and to speak up. Um, so, well, we're right at time. Elise, thank you so much. Is there one or two tips that you would have as a takeaway for someone who's just getting into security awareness? They just got handed the hat of being the security
Hmm.
awareness manager. That you think that is important for them to kind of take away from this talk.
Sure. First thing is, yes, absolutely, we need security awareness training, and it needs to be more frequent than annually.
Right.
Second thing would be to measure the effectiveness of that training, try different types of content, and then test to see what is retained by your
Mhm.
humans after the fact using phishing or vishing assessments, for example. And then
Mhm.
finally, really figure out, and this is specific to every organization, it's going to be a little bit different, but really figure out
Right.
how to get that buy-in and that investment to create that culture of reporting.
Right. Okay. Those are great. Really great insights. And thank you again so much. We'll include links in a recap that we'll do of this recording. And and if you can also connect with Alethe on LinkedIn and, go listen to her podcast that she did on Darknet Diaries, really fabulous. Um, thank you so much, Alethe, for your time and your insights and really appreciate having you here.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.